notification.
That's right, and then you're right on time. The stream is live. Welcome, everyone. Acoustic Guitar Magazine, Patreon, community. We're here today for a special holiday treat. You might be able to tell by my amazing Pat holiday sweater that I somehow dug out of the tote this very afternoon before this get-together with Mr. Sean McGowan, the author of Holiday Songs for Fingerstyle Guitar, which is an amazing book that we're going to be taking a look at today. Sean, you're coming to us from Denver, or from Boulder, is that right?
Denver, yeah, just outside of Denver.
Okay, great. And tell people that aren't familiar with you a little bit about yourself. What do you do for a living besides make cool guitar books?
Yeah, I've been a full-time musician my whole life, and I have had the privilege of working for Acoustic Guitar Magazine for 20 years now. I started writing for the magazine back in 2004, doing lessons and occasional, articles and reviews, things like that, but mostly lessons. In addition to that, my full-time job is I'm a music professor at the University of Colorado, Denver. But it's been such a pleasure writing for Acoustic Guitar Magazine all of these years, because those have turned into various books, including the one that we're exploring today, Holiday Songs for Fingerstyle Guitar, which I just realized it's about 10 years old now, maybe even more than that. But
the days are long and the years go fast, right?
They sure do, yeah.
But before we get into like the nuts and bolts of today, where we're going to go over one of the chapters from the book that we're going to make available for people, which is "Oh Holy Night." Maybe you could just play us in with a little bit. This prelude and "We Gathered Together," I think, is another tune you want to play. Maybe just if people aren't familiar with these songs, we'll talk about them a little bit afterwards before we get into the workshop part of it. So yes, please set the mood, if you would. Right on. That sets kind of a seasonal mood for me. It's got that good feel. And WR Toombs from the chat says it sounds nice too. So it's not just me that thinks it's.
Well, thanks everybody for joining us, and it's really nice that you could make time on November 1st. And given that this is November 1st, I thought maybe we could ease into the holidays a little bit with a few songs that are attributed to Thanksgiving. And some of those songs are in the collection, are in the book. And of course, some of these songs, like We Gather Together, for example, wasn't originally a Thanksgiving song per se, but it's interesting how these songs become part of the lexicon and traditions over time for various reasons. But there are also songs in the book that were specifically composed for Thanksgiving. Like, for example, one that not a lot of people are aware of is Jingle Bells. That was originally composed in Massachusetts as a kind of a Sunday service song to celebrate all of the slave races that were happening in that small town in Massachusetts. And so it eventually is now, kind of the most classic Christmas song, but it's actually a Thanksgiving song. So in this book, I wanted to make sure to pay tribute to some of these Thanksgiving songs because they're fewer, and there are some great songs in that repertoire.
Yeah, people don't typically associate songs, I think, with Thanksgiving, right? Except for, but To Grandmother's House We Go, maybe. But
that's in there, Over the River and Through the Woods. That's right. Yeah, and then the Arlo Guthrie song from Alice's Restaurant.
Right, there's a little more modern take on it. Yeah, that's
but it's interesting. Just a quick little. I think one of the things that was really fun for me in putting this book together and working with acoustic guitar on it, it was there are just these little intros to each of the songs in the book, and part of the intro involves performance advice, like how to do a specific technique, why it's in a tuning. And, we'll talk about this a little later today, but, I spent a lot of time really being intentional about whether a song would be arranged in a particular key, standard tuning, in DAD, drop D, or even other tunings. And that's part of the fun of arranging. So part of the intros for the songs involve performance techniques and an approach. And part of it is just the story of the song itself. So, like, for example, this one, I'll just share some from the notes here. This is originally it's a Dutch Christian hymn. And it was composed, the actual melody was composed in 1597, which is amazing to me because it's just like, some of these are very old. And the song, the original Dutch lyrics were composed to an even older Dutch folk melody. So anyway, the hymn that was composed later was celebrating the victory of the Dutch over Spain in the Battle of Turnhout during the 80 Years' War. American musicologist Theodore Baker wrote the modern English lyrics in 1894, and the song as we now know it first appeared in an American hymnal in 1903. It's a hymn that celebrates gathering and worship despite forces of oppression. And its resonance and popularity increased dramatically here in America during and right after World War I. So today, it's usually sung in churches right around Thanksgiving, either the Sunday before or right after Thanksgiving.
That's fascinating, to trace the history of these songs. And it's cool that each one of them comes with a little backstory.
Yeah, it's really cool. And I love how a lot of them were sort of, in folk music, we read and study a lot about like song collectors, whether it's A.P. Carter and Leslie Riddle or, the Lomaxes, all these people that keep that tradition alive, even to modern people like Don Flemons, keeping those song collection traditions alive. And it's really cool how they entered the American lexicon of music, usually through hymnals, but also through song collections. But, despite all of the various collections or origins or cultures or whatever, a lot of them have the same common themes like this one, which is basically celebration and gathering and remaining optimistic despite dark forces happening in the world or a war or something like that. And that's really a common thread that goes through all of these songs, which I'm really attracted to,
Yeah, I mean, you consider that in the generationality of it all, how many generations have clung to these same songs, throughout the ages, for that comfort and that.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, before we get started, I know you're going to start out with "O Holy Night" and go through that song for us, like from the arrangement from the book. I just want to let people that are out there know that you can type your comments into the chat, and they will get through to us. And Sean's going to go through this song. We'll talk about it a little bit after that, and then it's going to break down kind of how he takes a song, a bit like a simple song like Jingle Bells that we just spoke about, and kind of makes it his own. You know, what his tricks and techniques are for arranging a song. He talked about maybe putting it in a different key or trying out different tuning or things like that. So, you know, I'm really excited about what we're here to learn together. As I said earlier, there's a free chapter of O Holy Night that's available to everyone that's here tonight, today, this afternoon, depending on your time zone. And we're about to turn it loose to Sean. Any questions for me before we go, Sean, or anything you want to mention before jumping into this?
I don't think so. I think, we'll talk about this. We'll do a little bit of a musical breakdown or a play-by-play for those of you that want to, follow along with your guitars. But just to set this song up, this is one of my favorite songs. I know it's one of Lizzie Lesterman's favorite songs too. And this is Oh Holy Night. And just this, I just want to share some of this information, and then I'll play it, because there's just some really cool origins of this song. So this song, like many songs that have become part of the Christmas tradition in terms of the songs, was composed actually by a Jewish composer, Adolph Adam, and the lyricist was Capeau, who was an interesting fact about this particular song. As soon as it was debuted in the church, became very popular with the congregation. People really were attracted to this melody and loved singing along with it. But because of Capeau, the lyricist's association with various, at the time, socialist groups and secular movements that publicly criticized, Capeau was a poet and a writer, and he publicly criticized the power and corruption that was happening within the church at the time. This song was actually banned from the church as kind of like revenge against Capeau. So for quite a little period there, people weren't allowed to sing or play this in church. And of course, the power of the song overcame that eventually, and it made its way back into the repertoire. So fast forward into the future, it's really cool. This was actually the world's first musical broadcast on AM radio. On Christmas Eve, 1906, radio pioneer Reginald Fessenden is said to have played the song on his violin, broadcasting the performance along with a reading from the Gospel of Luke and a phonograph recording of a composition by Handel. And that was the first broadcast of this song on AM radio. It's really cool. So I think it's so fascinating reading about the history and origin of these songs and how they've endured. This song is such a beautiful piece of music that even being, banned by the church for a little while, it made its way back into the repertoire and still remains a favorite, hundreds of years later. It's really cool.
Great. Hey, there's a comment from Eric Westfall that says your arrangement of O Holy Night has been his favorite holiday song to play for the last few years. He's already started working on it for this year. It's a gorgeous arrangement with the drop tuning. What tuning? Thanks, Eric. What tuning is it in?
So this tuning is in what I call a cello tuning, which is low to high, low C, so 2 whole steps down from E, and then a G above that. So we have C. Let me turn the gain up just a little bit. C, G, and then the rest in standard. D, G, B, E. So what's nice about that tuning is it gives you the range of maybe a 7-string guitar, or what I think of as like the range of a piano with those low notes. And but the top 4 strings are in standard, so it's not too foreign. You can still get get around. And by the way, I did a column or a lesson just on that tuning. It's in Hawaii, it's called the Wahine tuning. But I did a lesson for that on acoustic guitar that I think is under one of the books, Chords Under Your Fingertips, I think is the book that's in, if you want to check that out. But that's the tuning for it. So I'll play this through, and then we'll just talk about this arrangement, I guess.
Sounds good. Thank you. My cat, who is not often attracted to music, so good work. She showed up during the middle of that performance. So we got a couple of questions about what the equipment you're using, what your guitar is, what your strings and gauges you're using in the lower tuning.
Yeah.
If you've got a particular setup you're tuning into right now. Ron,
sure, absolutely.
Ron is very curious.
I can
Ron
talk about
Buff.
guitar all day. Yeah. So the first guitar that I was playing, and I'll play again, is an acoustic that I've had for almost 30 years, built by Brad Nickerson. And he's an incredible luthier based in Asheville, North Carolina. And that's this one that I played and actually recorded my Thanksgiving and Christmas Tidings album with that, and the original video for this. That's just in standard. This is a beautiful bourgeois OM cutaway, and I'm originally from Maine, and so I've known the guys in the bourgeois shop for many years, and they're incredible people, incredible builders. So I've had this guitar for several years now, and I wanted to use this just to keep it in the low tuning, so I didn't have to deal with tuning. String gauges, usually 12 to 53 is what I prefer. And then both of these guitars just have a K and K Mini pickup in them, just easy peasy. It's just right under the bridge there. Minimal fuss. And then I'm going into a Grace Design preamp. It's an Alex preamp. Grace is here in Colorado, right up the road in Lyons. They make amazing mic pre's and guitar pedals. Usually a lot of people use the Felix model. This is the single channel Alex preamp, and that is going through a little reverb right into a Henriksen Bud amplifier, which is a beautiful little amp that's about that big. Those are also made right here in town in Colorado, and Peter Henriksen's a very good friend of mine. They sound great for jazz guitar, but also for acoustic guitar, fiddle, mandolin, vocals, everything. They're just flat. So that's kind of a gear rundown. I see the a couple of questions about nails, and I have no nails, 0 nails. So 100% flesh. I keep them chopped right off. So I don't have any advice to offer in terms of nail care, but like many of my favorite guitar players, Tommy Emmanuel, Tuck Andrus, Lawrence Juber, many others, no nail, just flesh.
All right. They are a meat guy, as Ron puts it. A nail or a meat player. Yeah. Right hand, of course. That's all. That's great. So maybe talk a little bit about that arrangement, how you approached it.
Yeah. So, I think with this and also Jingle Bells and anything, when you're talking about recording a song that everybody knows, that's a nice thing because, everybody will know the melody immediately, but it also kind of puts on a little bit of pressure because, there's a 1,000 different possibilities of how to arrange something. So the first question that I ask myself is, do I want to be more adventurous with this particular arrangement, or do I want to really stick towards more of a traditional interpretation of the melody? And so for me, and this is where subjectivity is everything, and that's good. You have the freedom to make those choices as an arranger now. But for me, this song and other songs such as Silent Night, I don't really want to do anything to it. Like, I don't want to reharmonize Silent Night. I don't want to reharmonize this song. It's so beautiful just the way it is that I want to keep that intact. So then if I've made that decision, for me, the arranging process is kind of like going through a little flow chart, right? It's like ask questions always. And then, the answer is yes or no. Do I want to do this? Do I want to do that? Yes or no? So I wanted to keep this particular tune fairly traditional, meaning absolutely keep the melody intact. I do that all the time anyway. Don't ever mess with the melody. But there are harmonic liberties that you can do. But in this case, I really wanted to stick to the original chord changes of the song because I think it's perfect just the way it is. So then the question is, well, now what can I do with it? So I decided to, kind of put it in the key of C. And as soon as I made that decision, I knew that I wanted to expand the range of the guitar, and that's why I, came up with that tuning to put it in, which is again just drop C, C, G, and then the rest is in standard, so I could still grab chords without having to relearn a bunch of voicings in a tuning that I didn't know or something like that. So that was, I think, the first decision was just to really keep it traditional, keep that slow kind of 6/8, that nice 3 feel going. And having those open strings in the key of C, you've got C, of course, the root, and then the 5 is right there. So you can really keep that ringing. And the idea is I'm imagining in my mind a choir in a church or a congregation singing this. And so I want those chords to be lingering in the air and those low drone notes to just like really ring out underneath the melody. So also thinking about the texture being legato and really like choir-like and the resonance of a church and sacred and holy. I ask myself, how can I achieve that? And then the answers are usually musical. Okay, I'm going to try this tuning, or maybe you would use a capo. There are some songs in the book that are in Dadgad that do use a capo specifically because I wanted the resonance of that on the guitar, or because the song might have an origin from Scotland or Ireland or England, and you could capture that using a capo. So with this, the chords are all right there. Again, like the top 4 strings are in standard, so what looks like a C chord is right there, and I can kind of keep that going. And so we're just setting up a real simple intro here. melody is right there, starting off with that open E string. Then it goes to a 4 chord and an alternate tuning. Now, when you go to those, traditional chords, like even something simple like a 1-4-5 C F G, you have to find the fingerings for it. But that's okay. It'll just take that's part of the fun of exploring a new tuning and in a new arrangement. So I just basically am playing the melody pretty much as written, with those chords as written, and just to keep the flow of the tempo going and the flow of the song moving forward, I'm just letting the melody ring out while I'm hitting some arpeggios, and this is a very common fingerstyle technique, but you have the melody. And even within something as simple like that, you could just let the notes ring. Or you could add, some embellishment in there, just using your fingers on different strings. So, just basically plucking the strings. It all depends on the texture that you want to create. For me, I really think about moments in the song, whether I'm playing it as written, like I'm reading the music now, or if I'm improvising it, I've got it, committed to memory. I can improvise within those parameters, like more motion, doing like maybe something even, little breaks across the strings, or just little different patterns, like a double time thing, if I wanted to. The point is just having the chords at your disposal and the technique at your disposal, so that you can express what you want at the moment. That would just be an example of very simple improvising within an arrangement that you already have going there. So texturally, those are the things that I think about. A little performance note here: when it gets to the E minor chord, now there's a little bit of a stretch here. Not too bad, 4 frets, but then it jumps down to the G. So that's a little bit of a stretch right there. But if that's too much, don't worry about it. I mean, I just will let certain notes go all of the time. So you can let maybe the melody diminish a little quicker, or just let go of the bass line. And then just jump down here to the G. And try to use those open strings whenever you can. I mean, if you know that the note in the melody is going to be in an open string, then by all means use it. You want to take advantage of those all of the time. And so by making the choice of doing this in C major and choosing a low C tuning, that's where there's a lot of the melody notes are going to be open strings, that's a good strategy to use. Even if you're playing jazz or any style, Joe Pass would often do certain standards and especially blues in the key of G, because it's such a guitar friendly. He's playing jazz, but it's a guitar friendly key. He's got the the open E string and especially the open D string for that 5 pedals. So just always be aware of open strings. And then when it gets into like the B section of this song, now I'm actually using the open G string, which is the 5th string tuned down. Now I can use these triads and harmonize the melody. So I can just fill in that basic melody, because in my mind, I'm picturing like some singers singing in harmony. So that becomes... And so the melody itself is just G, A, D, G, and recognizing that those are all chord tones of triads. So it's just a G, G triad, and then an F triad. That's just one way I decided to harmonize that A. I could have also done an A minor maybe. That might sound nice, and then back to a G. Or maybe I could have gone A minor. But then maybe I like that A minor, but I don't really like the B minor. So the point is, I'm trying to illustrate, is that there's a lot of experimentation, exploring, and just trying things out. Use your knowledge of theory. Say, okay, the melody note is a G, and then it goes to A. How can I harmonize that? What chords do those notes belong to? Well, a G obviously belongs to a G. It also belongs to an E minor. Maybe that first chord could be that E minor to F. So ultimately I just explore, try different sounds, and then in this case I settled on really just simple just a G and then an F over G. So I'm pedaling that open G string, and I even add the thumb in there again to create some forward motion, right? So a lot of times I'm looking for contrast in my solo guitar arrangements, because there's just one of you. So, I imagine, okay, what would a bass player play if there was a bass in the band? And, so the bassist might do something that's got a little bit of movement to it in contrast to that lingering, dotted chord note. So maybe underneath that we'll go. Now maybe constant eighth notes would be a little too much. So I just back it off. So the point is just try all, get these ideas, try them, and then just see how you like them. And a lot of times I can make decisions pretty quickly in real time, but I think a great exercise to do while you're exploring arranging these songs for solo guitar is just record yourself on the phone. Record these different possibilities and options, and then maybe have a little distance, go outside, take a walk, grab something to eat, whatever, and then come back to it later, because sometimes when you come back later, you'll have fresh ears and things will sound different.
It's all basically what you feel, what you're feeling in the moment. Somebody wants to know if you write down these ideas as they come to you?
Yeah, I just noticed there were some questions coming in on it. Sometimes I do. Sometimes I do write them down. I just have like a little sketchbook that has notation, like a blank staff and tab. I'll often write down ideas in tab because I like to use, especially if it's an alternate tuning or if it's using some right-hand fretting techniques or specific voicing, I'll just tab that out real quick so I can remember it, really is all it is. So yeah, I do recommend writing it down so you can remember a particular voicing that you like.
That's a great idea to record yourself too. I mean, that never hurts. And some things, some brilliant ideas are so fleeting. You can, 5 minutes they can be gone. So if you
absolutely. I have my phone. I mean, I'm not even a songwriter, but I know songwriters do this a lot. But I have my phone nearby, and whenever I come up with a cool groove or a voicing that I like or a lick or whatever, I'll just do a quick voice memo. Just press a button and then it's there. And I'm really glad that I did, because I know that we've all had the terrible, like the frustrating experience of like coming up with a really cool riff or a song or whatever, and you're like, I'll remember that, and then life happens, and then a week later you go back, you're like, oh, what was that line?
Poof, right?
It's gone
to the universe. Ron wants to know how important bass lines are to your arrangements. Do you think of the melody and bass lines as the sonic extremes, I think is what he's trying to say, and then filling in the space in between these extremes?
Yeah, quite often I do. And when we workshop Jingle Bells in a few minutes, that's exactly what I'll talk about, kind of building it, like working with the melody and then adding in some bass. So now, and I think that's really good, especially if you don't know the song. I mean, I think with all of these songs, we know them by heart. We grew up with them, presumably. But with a lot of songs that I don't know, like maybe an unfamiliar jazz standard or an original song of someone else's that I'm learning for a gig, I'll just start off with a very basic sketchbook of it, the skeleton of the song, and that is the melody and the bass, and then just create like a very simple counterpoint arrangement, and then start filling in the chords. So yeah, I'm quite aware of the bass lines and the bass part, because really for me, I ultimately think of voices, so even though we're playing solo guitar, I hear this as like, the potential for 6 voices singing together. And so when I arrange, I try to arrange musically or vocally or lyrically, maybe more so than guitaristically, if that makes sense.
It does.
Then you try to come up with a technique to, to capture that musical idea or for me, that vocal idea that I want to hear. And that's where you can get into some cool discoveries, that you might not have thought of otherwise. If you just kind of default to your same chord voicings or whatever, I think that this going for something new, the sound of a particular thing, whether it's a brass quintet or a choir or whatever, that will force you to try a different tuning, a drop tuning, a new technique, maybe some harmonics. And by the way, I was going to mention this earlier, but a lot of times right off the bat, especially if I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to arrange Oh Holy Night, and I've just got nothing, like I have no ideas or concepts or plans, I'll just listen to, I'll just go online and I'll listen to a bunch of different versions of it in all different genres, and that's a really good thing to do too. So I listen to a lot of like Chicago brass quintets, and country artists and gospel artists, and even rock band, Trans-Siberian Orchestra arrangements of these holiday tunes. And you can always glean something from listening to that and just incorporate that idea, and then maybe that one idea will spark something, and you can go with it.
Awesome. The possibilities are endless, and so are the inspirations. That's, it's important to remember with art all the time.
All the time, yes.
David 30G says it's great to hear / see you again. Their son graduated from UC Denver with a recording arts degree. Happy holidays. Very happy to get these songs going again. And then Ron, very active Ron, filling in the sonic space with well-chosen harmonic additions, thirds, sevenths, etc., to produce a harmonic movement, a la two-part inventions like Bach.
Sure. Yeah. And that's obviously something to always strive for. But I do spend a lot of time, for example, with my students at University of Colorado. We start off with playing those keyboard inventions. They're just two-part duos. And once they start to get those lines under their fingers, I'll ask them to do a harmonic analysis. So we've got one or maybe two voices, but there are clearly chords and chord movement and harmonic movement. So I'll have them. And usually that can be a profound life-changing moment for them in their musical development, as it was in mine. Just playing Bach on guitar is really great. Is good for you.
Indeed. All right. Anything else you want to say about Oh Holy Night, or do you want to move on?
No, I think have fun with it. If you decide to pick up a copy of the book, it's full of great stories and introductions, performance notes, and I played Oh Holy Night exactly as written in the book. So I'm trying to play things so that you get an accurate portrayal of what's in the book, and I'm very happy because a lot of people have contacted me through my website or different mediums and say how much they enjoy playing these arrangements. And I think at the end that's what it's all about. Whether you're just doing it for your own benefit in your practice room, or you're playing for your church, or you have a family gathering, it's a really wonderful thing to pull out the guitar and play a musical arrangement of some of these holiday favorites.
Absolutely. And, enough of a challenge, some of these arrangements, for people that, they can sink their teeth into them and perfect them over the years,
That's right. That's right. Myself included, and now's the time to start practicing. November 1st, we might even be a little late.
I was going to say, yeah, if the retail outlets are any judge, then we're late.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Well, the joke about all of those classic Christmas specials and holiday albums that we all grew up with and loved, they always recorded those in the middle of June or July when it was just sweltering hot in the studio.
Imagine that, just over and over in a hot studio. I can just see it.
Right.
But Jingle Bells, one of the most known progressions of any song. You're going to give us a little overview of how you would maybe approach it.
Yes.
From its basic, simple melody and then take it from there.
That's exactly. So I believe you can confirm for me, Kevin, but there should be some accompanying PDFs for folks that are joining us out there.
Indeed.
So so we can follow along. I just basically, in preparing for today, I just came up with some ideas, a basic sketchbook of what goes through my mind when I'm thinking about this. So I would say the overarching things would just be, if you don't have a clear idea, and sometimes I have a very clear idea of how I want to arrange a song, but if you don't have a clear idea, just go listen to all of those other, that's your research. Just listen and something will click. You'll say, oh, I really like that about that particular arrangement. I'd like to incorporate that into my arrangement, and things will just start snowballing in a good way. And then another thing that I'll do is just really continue to ask myself questions and then answer those questions on the guitar by just trying things out. So if we take a look at Jingle Bells, for example, if I'm looking at the PDF now, and I'm back in standard here. So I'm just arbitrarily picking the key of C because that's home key for a lot of us, right? So there's our C chord. And I think the first thing to do, it sounds obvious, but really the first thing to do is just to learn the melody. And there it is in example 1A. I mean, everybody, you know, and play the melody as simply as possible to start with. So we literally do have this, and, you know, the melody's on the third, which in this case is E. So it's literally like. It's very simple, but even just doing that will give you some ideas of maybe a key that you like or don't like, and maybe, you know, some of this is influenced by whether you plan on singing along with yourself, because a lot of times people will like to do a little instrumental arrangement and then start singing. So all of those things are factors into deciding what key you want to set it in, but also fingering the placement. You know, it just you might say to yourself, you know, it's just the way the melody is. It just doesn't sit well on the fretboard. So maybe I need to find another key or another tuning. And so just keep it super simple, and then just start asking those questions. You know, how do I like the sound of it? So again, those first 8 bars are just almost like doing a very, very simple counterpoint. You're hearing the melody as it relates to the bass. Do it more simple. So that's like what I would think of as the skeleton of that. I'm laughing because I just had this thought. If any of you remember the Charlie Brown Christmas special, or if you have kids or grandkids and you've watched it recently, there's a great scene in there. It's kind of it's relevant, which is why I'm thinking about it. But there's a great scene where Lucy's hanging out with Schroeder at the piano, and she's like, "Say, do you know Jingle Bells?" And he's playing these like different, you know, versions of it harmonized with different chords, and she's getting, you know, frustrated and irritable, and she's like, no, Jingle Bells, you know. And then he just at the very end, he's like. That's the joke about that. So the point there is that you do want to make it so that it obviously is recognizable to the listeners and your audience. So this is just one example of how I might start developing this thing. So if you look at the next example, 1B, if provided you like that key and the fingering seems to work out, you know, meaning the melody is comfortable under your fingers, or you know, you've got open strings that you want to use. Now you can start thinking about rhythmic phrasing, because you don't want it to sound dry like that last Lucy Schroeder example. You want to have it be recognizable, but, you know, a little exciting, you know, maybe swing a little bit, whatever it is. So one thing to start is just adding some rhythm to it. So 1B would be. So now it's got a little bit more, you know, more happening to it. And what I'm using are the devices specifically of anticipation, which is you see in the first bar there. You're playing the melody just a little bit before you would normally expect it, usually by an 8th note, right? So you've got anticipation where something comes before it's expected, or delayed attack, which is what's happening in the third measure there on the and of beat 3. We're just delaying a little bit. So, you know, jingle all the way. And a lot of times for my guideline, I'll just think to myself, how would I sing it? You know, so. Just start sketching out the melody with the rhythm. And then example 2A now shows how we're going to maybe fill it in with some bass. So now instead of just staying on the roots, I'm going to do a simple, like almost ragtime, you know, Piedmont blues-ish thing where I'm like alternating between the root and the fifth. So. You know, maybe a little passing, very simple, just keeping things super simple. The next chord is an F, and I'm on a G, so maybe I'll just do a little walk down. And in there, you know, there's a secondary dominant in here with that D7 chord, you know, where it goes. So D7 to G before it goes back home to C. So I'm out, you know, with my bass line capture and inversion. So we're like, I'm already down there, so I might just choose to put an F sharp in the bass. Or not, you know, but I'll try it and see if I like the sound of it before I'll commit to it. So that's kind of the next step. If we move on to page 2 of the PDF here, now we're on example 2B. We're filling in with some chords. So as Ron's comment asked or suggested, this is exactly what I'm doing. I'm just trying things out with the texture. So I've got this moving bass line now, and I'm going to fill it in with some chords. So example 2B is. Again, just exploring the basic skeleton of the song, taking note of what I like, what I don't like, what works, what doesn't work. And then pretty quickly after that, I get into chordal embellishments. So example 3A, and then I'll add the rhythmic embellishments. I'll come back to those ideas that I shared earlier about anticipation and delayed attack. Once I get the chords kind of going and under my fingers and have an idea of the direction, I'll put that rhythmic articulation right back in there. But just keeping it simple with example 3A, we've got some chord embellishments now. We've got still very simple, but starting to sound like music. And then in the last chord of that phrase, we've got this. So now I'm setting up that following F chord with a C7. So we've got, again, just to create a little bit of color. And then you can elaborate on that with a chromatic approach, which is more of like a jazz-influenced approach. But example 3B, instead of doing a C7 over G, we're doing basically a C7 over G flat, sometimes known as a tritone sub. And that's a really great way to get some color in. So in context, it's, now you're starting to add some different colors and flavors in there. And the version that I ended up recording and that's in the book is influenced by Chet Atkins. But Chet Atkins incorporated jazz-influenced harmony all the time in his playing. He wasn't afraid to use any of these chords. And then so that brings us to example 3C, just moving along here. Sometimes people will change chord types even. And this is where you're starting to kind of like tread the waters of possibly reharmonizing it, or sometimes an arrangement of a song becomes so popular that does become, it feels like the original melody. So for example, in 3C, we go to the 4 chord F, and then sometimes it goes to F minor. That sound somewhere along the way, people started singing that movement of like, it's kind of like the Beatles in my life, right? It's like 4 major, 4 minor, back to 1. And so that has become such a common way of harmonizing those chords of Jingle Bells that has become its own sort of standard, So that might be an option that you want to capture. So, maybe the whole thing is, And then maybe instead of just going to D here, we could try an A minor 7 and set up a 2-5 to G. Finishing it off with kind of a unique, there's the melody, but instead of just going, we could go to a G7, but I just like the sound of maybe this chord, which is listed as a G add 2 over B, kind of a Steely, to my ears, like a Steely Dan chord. So this just gives you a little bit of ideas of all of the questions and explorations, if you will. Let me try one more thing, and then we'll start answering these questions real quick. So just the last example on the PDF is maybe, again, this is, it's up to you depending on the song and the situation, but maybe I'll actually, with a song like Jingle Bells, it's so ubiquitous and so common that maybe it needs something different, like a different time feel, maybe putting it in a different time signature or a different rhythmic style. So, and this could mean anything, but example 4 portrays maybe something like kind of a Brazilian feel, like a Brazilian flavored feel with the syncopation of the chords and the bossa kind of rhythm behind it, or a very slowed down samba. So now you have this. Brazilian music. Now there's the syncopation with the rhythm there. It's got almost kind of like a pseudo samba bossa type of thing, but I'm also adding a lot of chord embellishments in there that are common in the Brazilian style. So, depending on the tempo, if I put it together, it starts to come together. And sometimes I'll think about, of course, I mean, quite often I'll think about the meaning of the song, right? So if it's a sacred text, it's got like "Oh Holy Night." It wants to be very gentle and spiritual and sacred, and sweet. Something like "Jingle Bells," right? That's a secular song. That's kind of like a party song about the horse races in town. So it's festive. So it's meant to be moving and fast. So I think a faster tempo and something that's a little bit more exciting serves this particular song really well.
Good stuff. Yeah, it's such a nice window into the creative process, and it just seems like you have so many tools available to you, theoretically speaking, that maybe a lot of people won't, but they can stumble upon these things through your book, right? Playing
Yeah,
along with it.
absolutely. And not only my book, but Acoustic Guitar has published several really great, very easy, approachable, like non-intimidating books on music theory. I mean, if you go to the store.acousticguitar.com website, there's a lot of these books, some of which I've contributed little articles and lessons here and there, but the books are great because they draw on all of Acoustic Guitar's contributors and people, educators that have been doing this for a long time, that have figured out ways to make harmony and chord voicings and all of these different techniques approachable and non-intimidating. That's one of the great things about all the books that you got.
Yeah, you never know whose approach is going to click that box for you or turn on that light for you either. So yeah, exactly. Both at the store and just at acousticguitar.com, there's just a wealth of great things out there for building up theory, if you've got the gumption and the time. Just checking out some questions here. Dan wants to know how you might move away from arranging something in first position, which is he's trying to get away from that. He seems like he wants to put everything there when he starts putting something together. But again, that's that's about having tools in your toolbox, right? And knowing where the chords
that's right.
formed.
Well, I mean, the easiest way to do that would just be to like capo 3 or 4, and then you're moving up here with the same chords. It's a start. But I would just say, when I put together the arrangements in the book, Dawn and everybody else, I really tried to be mindful of like all different levels and musical backgrounds and, experiences and all of that, meaning that some of the songs, and again, these were musical decisions ultimately, but something like Silent Night is so simple that everybody can play. Like you can just sit down and play it, open position chords, chords that we all know. And then there's some songs in there, like It Happened Upon a Midnight Clear, that are much more jazz influenced. And so I think, short of going to college or enrolling in a theory class or reading a book or whatever, the best way to explore these newer sounds and get out of that open position is just to play through other arrangements that are less familiar, that are outside of your wheelhouse. That's exactly what I did. And not thinking about it or worrying about it too much, but just getting your fingers on those new chords up in this area of the neck, and then connecting your ears to what's playing, and then really saying like, wow, this is really nice. I mean, way back, like in the 80s, when I was first starting out a lot of these things, I would just read like Guitar Player magazine and just those little columns. And I didn't know what any of those chords were. A lot of them were jazz focused, but I would just play them. I'm like, wow, I really like that sound. Or later on, I might get a hold of a guitar transcription by like a Jim Hall solo or something. And I had no idea what the chord was, similar with like a Joe Pass book, but I knew that I liked the sound of it. And so that's really kind of like dipping your foot into the pool. And even if you don't know what the function is, that's okay. If you know what the sound is, just to get you out of those old habits, that's a good thing. So there are several arrangements in this book that do that will get you into unfamiliar territory with some perhaps new chords and sounds that you can add to your own arrangements.
That's great. Good stuff. So what's coming up in the future? We've got a book, The Holistic Guitarist, that's coming out soon. So keep an eye out for that.
Yes.
You can, you're keeping a list of that at your place. Is that right? So at
Yeah.
SeanMcGowanmusic.com, people can get a hold of you and keep
So
an
my
eye there for
website, yeah, is
the guitar
SeanMcGowanGuitar.com.
thing.
It's also the same website is under theholisticguitarist.com. And the name of the book is The Holistic Guitarist. And I'm really excited about this. And I think that acoustic guitar readers will really love it. It's basically 9 chapters of body, mind, and soul for guitar. So body is just like physical wellness, how to avoid injury prevention. There's a ton of information in the book about like stretches to do, how to shape your practice sessions, your posture, everything that will help you avoid injuries. And then there's also a chapter in there like what to do if you do have injuries. And I had lots of great contributors, doctor, MD friends that work with a lot of musicians and orchestras. There's chapters in there on mental wellness, including performance anxiety, how to deal with that, the inner critic, as well as just things, pragmatic things such as like memorization, how to memorize music, using visualization to grow as a guitarist and a musician. And then the spirit part is I use different traditions, for example, of Japanese philosophies of wabi-sabi and kaizen to that I think are very relevant to musicians, and borrowing some of those concepts, philosophical concepts from Zen, for example. And then the last chapter is really fun. I have a lot of great guitar player friends who contributed exactly like I interviewed them all, and they answered questions of like, how do you stay healthy? How do you sustain a career in music? How do you beat writer's block? How do you, stay focused, and all of those things. And we had incredible contributions from people like Vicky Ganfan and Alex DeGrassi and Eric Johnson and Adam Levy, and a bunch of really wonderful players of
The
all
pantheon of great players right there.
yeah,
That's
Lawrence
awesome.
Juber, it's just basically how they so it's everything but music, although there is a big chapter on technique, how to develop all of these techniques in a healthy way, and how to practice, because that's usually a common question that people have is like, there's so much, I get overwhelmed. What do I even practice if I have only a half an hour a day to practice? So I think this book is really exciting. So if you're interested, it's going to be out early next year. We're working on it right now, finishing it up. But you can certainly email me through the contact page at SeanMcGowanGuitar.com, and just simple like, hi, please put me on the list. And as soon as it is published, I'm compiling a folder, and I'll immediately reach out to all those folks that are interested and let you know that it's out.
Yeah, you can also keep an eye at acousticguitar.com because we'll be staying up on that for sure. Well, Sean, thank you so much for today. I'm just going to check and see. Oh, somebody would love an easy jazz version of Christmas Time Is Here. Sandy would. So.
Oh, one of my favorite tunes.
Is that a Giraldi tune, or what is that?
Yeah. Let's see. I think that's it. Great. Something like that. Yeah, that's a good one. Well,
that's a good place to jump off from. That Sandy is very happy to hear that. Ron is going to cut off all of his right-hand fingernails after listening to your tone. So, an unintended effect of this workshop is that some good nail work there. And I just again want to thank everybody for showing up today. Keep an eye on SeanMcGowanGuitar.com for upcoming projects for him. Always stay tuned to AcousticGuitar.com and Acoustic Guitar Patreon. We've got cool things going on all the time. Lots of live workshops been happening lately. We've got a flat picking workshop coming up with Rebecca Frazier on November 14th, I believe. So keep that in mind. And again, thanks for your support. Thanks for being here. This is a great book. If you do want to pick up a copy of it, I guarantee it'll keep you happy for, maybe the next decade or two, I would think. There's a lot to work on there, and there's a lot that'll, a lot to learn from people like Sean. Thank you so much.
Putting together, and thank you everybody for joining us, and thanks Kevin for being such a great host, and thanks Joey for the behind the scenes tech mastery, and just in advance, happy holidays everybody. Wishing you all a very peaceful and wonderful holiday season full of gathering and good cheer. So cheers everyone.
Cheers to you. Thanks again, Sean. Maybe play us out a little something beautiful.
Yep.
Right on.